Hey team, today we're going to talk about leadership with Colonel Chip O'Neal. Chip is a graduate of North Georgia College. He's a medical service officer and commanded twice at the 05 level. The first was the Primary Care and Soldier Readiness Command, Fort Bliss, Texas. And the second was the Public Health Activity, which was all veterinary services and clinics in the Southwest U.S. and all the way down to Honduras. So some big organizations there. Chip's deployed to Bosnia once and to Iraq twice. He's got a great Army family, married to Linda. They've got 4 kids, 3 daughters and one son. So Chip, just the first question, you've worked for a lot of leaders across all different branches. Who's the best leader you ever worked for, and what made him the best?
I tell you, that's one of the perks, I think, of being medical service corps. We plug and play into a lot of different organizations. And so, you know, there's been almost a Rolodex of great leaders. The first one that's probably the most impactful was a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Dwayne Gamble at the time. I think now he's a 2-star logistician. When I was a Charlie Company commander in the 101st, he was my battalion commander. 9/11 happened while we were at Fort Campbell. We went into Iraq together. But before all that, leading into the command and during that, there were several things that kept going wrong, it seemed. I had the weirdest thing of all, you know, where I kept all of my equipment, and in medical companies, we tend to have quite a bit of little bits and pieces of equipment, a lot more perhaps than most units would. But the place where we kept it, over a long weekend, a steam pipe burst, and it contaminated all of my TONE equipment with toxic mold spores. Oof. What do you do about that? There's no FM about that. So that happened. Other personnel things happened. There's this occasion where we're eating an MRE on a Humvee hood, and I look at him, I'm like, boss, what am I doing wrong? How are all these things happening? Well, you know, what could I do to fix them? You know, and he was shocked that I was asking the question, and he said, simply, it's not that bad things are happening. It's about what you do when these bad things happen. How do you recover from them? How do you keep the momentum in your company going because of the high up tempo that we had in the 101st at the time? It's not about you're creating these bad things. You're creating the momentum to overcome them. With the strong core of NCOs that you have, the young lieutenants, it's all about the recovery from it. So that was, it kind of helped to instill the confidence, stop second guessing myself. Yeah. The second one, once we were there in Iraq, I was blessed to be in 1st Brigade of the 101st, commanded by then Colonel Ben Hodges, who's just recently retired from Europe. But that was the most level-headed man I've ever seen in the midst of chaos. The grenade attack at Camp Pennsylvania, that was the first mass COL that any of us had ever been a part of, and you had all these people that you had worked with and come to know and care about. Suddenly, that horrific attack that happened there at Camp Pennsylvania. But through it all, and throughout that night, even though he had sustained his own injuries, then Colonel Hodges maintained that level head. He saw through the chaos, and he kept things going in the right direction. So we did not lose that momentum before we were 24 to 48 hours away from actually crossing the Burma and going into Iraq. Third most impactful probably is a guy named Scotty Dingle. He's a 2-star now, Medical Service Corps. We were working together as planners when the Walter Reed fiasco happened and that whole scandal about 10 years ago. And we helped to create what is now the Warrior Transition Units, but that was a pretty chaotic time too. But him also just being so sincere about what it means to be an authentic leader and never to lose your bearing has always meant quite a bit with me. And finally, I was fortunate to work for a guy named Jeffrey Johnson, who's now, I think, General Johnson at Fort Sam Houston. I was his brigade XO, and he taught me about trust. He taught me about how to be artful in showing dissent. And the advice always was, it's character over competence. You can train anybody to do anything, but it's a lot harder to change someone's character. That's much more rigid inside of someone's personality. But by far, I've been very blessed with many wonderful NCOs, officers, soldiers throughout my career, peers, subordinates, and superiors. Yeah,
those are a lot of great lessons that you're sharing. Keeping a level head, kind of enduring through hard times. So appreciate you sharing all that. But Chip, if we went back to your people that worked for you, you had a lot of civilian workers, you had officers, non-commissioned officers, warrants, you had across the gamut, and we asked them, what is Colonel O'Neal's #1 thing he always says or he always focuses on? What would that be?
I would hope it would be people over process. And I'll admit to you, I kind of bring this high energy, this intensity to whatever the task is. But it's not lost on the people that are around. I believe very much and the whole person approach to leadership. There is you can go even, it's not a Christian base or even a religious base, but it's really goes back to antiquity, to the cardinal virtues: courage, justice, temperance, prudence, and then I would add on there humility and magnanimity. And what that means is it's the whole person, whatever role that you have in your life, be it parent, son or daughter, spouse, citizen, parishioner, and then whatever it is you do in the military, when you're in uniform and outside of uniform, that whole person, if you are truly living the right way, then those things should apply and should create resonance and more importance in your relationships. I mentioned earlier the character over competence. Think about when we come into the military, we're all introduced to the Army values. Those values we're supposed to inculcate and reflect on. We have classes on. You do a couple of years in the military, and at some point you're probably subscribing to an ethos or a creed, be it the Ranger Creed, be it the NCO Creed,
Cool.
etc. And you're kind of more internalizing and operationalizing what these values are. Over the course of 2 decades of a career, the idea and what we get from Aristotle is that these things should have been so inculcated in who you are that they are now actions. It's the way that you see the world. As senior leaders, we're asked to interpret the tea leaves around us for our subordinates. If you do that through the lenses of virtue, you are more apt to enable not only your success, but the success of those around you.
Yeah, so it starts with character, and that's the foundation. And then as we move forward, we can develop competence, and that's almost a relief for a lot of junior leaders, lieutenants, young NCOs who think, man, I don't know everything, but if you've got character and you're willing to learn, you're going to go far in our Army. Mm-hmm. So speaking of going far, let's go all the way back to North Georgia College when you were a cadet. If you could go back in time and talk to Cadet Chip O'Neal, what would you tell him?
Man, I put my arm around that guy with his full head of hair and tell him to be aware of the habits that you're developing. You know, the way that you're living your life, it really is kind of the foundation for what's going to come. The point will absolutely come when you are not going to have all the time you need to get the things done that you want to get done. And that might be at home, that might be in the military, it might be whatever that, again, those roles that you have, even in the community. The habits that you established early on are really going to be with you for quite some time. I actually chewed tobacco for 28 years, believe it or not, but was able to
That's
finally,
a hard habit to break.
Kicked it big time, but it's kind of what you did. You know, you had that Copenhagen with you all the time. Happy to have beaten that. That was a tough thing, and I'm glad I didn't work for me during those years when I was trying to get off of that tobacco. But it's those habits, and it's not so much about the tobacco, but about being healthy and seeing things in a way that's more long range focused. Right. You know, it's not so much about the right now. You know, can you go out and have meaningful relationships with people? You know, I love the saying, out of 100 people that you meet a day, you should be interested in 100. I mean, truly and honestly, I mean, creating those relationships, well, not because there's a crisis, but before there's a crisis. But just relationships because everybody is coming with their own kind of context. And to understand that and to appreciate that and to find the value in there, in those connections is so very important and really is, I think, the magic sauce for success.
Yeah, and those habits start when you're young, when you're a cadet. The earlier we can inculcate those in ourselves and learn how to connect with people, the better we're going to be as we move forward in our career. Yeah. But Chip, you've had a lot of different branches, a lot of different civilians, a lot of different people work for you. What are your expectations of some of your junior leaders?
Well, we've spoken about character and about competence. So you got to be good at your job and be a steward of whatever the profession is. And that's, again, one of the intricacies of being in the medical field at all. I'm an English major. My master's is in strategic intelligence. How I ended up in the Medical Service Corps, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense, but that's kind of the beauty of it. Because you've got these technical experts, whether it be doctors or the compassion of a skilled nurse or a medic on the battlefield, the veterinarian or the environmental scientist, all of these, or even the dentist in the dental chair who creates the readiness. All of these things coming together is kind of tough. You've got different tribes, you might want to call it, to bridge that gap. So character in any person, that's universal. Competence in whatever that specific job is, and putting those pieces together is important. But the third C that I think is very relevant is commitment. Whatever it is that you're a part of, whatever the mission is, whatever the message of that commander might be, to be committed to and to generate internally the buy-in to help create the momentum to help create success and to create opportunity and decision space, perhaps. You've got to do it in a way that is compelling for folks. There's a fourth C, perhaps. But I think all of these things. Yeah, here we go. That's my favorite letter, Chip. Those things really come to create a fabric that everybody can buy into and create success.
Oh, that's good. And now specifically, that it's for all leaders. But when you look at your medical service corps officers and NCOs, what's different about the medical service corps? What do you expect specifically from them?
I think the word is bilingual. You've got to be able to speak Army in Army terms, and you've got to be able to speak medical in medical terms, and those are not the same verbiage. Right. And there's so much that the Army does not understand about the AMED, and vice versa. What the AMED doesn't, there's a lot of folks that they go to wherever they're comfortable, and that might be in a clinic, or perhaps it's in a division surgeon job or something like that. Yeah. But they stay there and don't go back and forth, and it really is. It's got to be a synthesis that is created, and I think that's the key. So I started out, I was very fortunate to be a medical platoon leader in an infantry battalion that's actually Camp Greaves, Korea, just off the DMZ in Korea. From there I went and did Company XO time in a more traditional medical unit, and then I got to be on the Army staff for a little while. And the first thing that happened when I got on the Army staff job was Hurricane Katrina hit, and there was quite a few things that medically we had to do in the reaction. The last thing that happened when I was there was the Walter Reed incident. So all of the things that happened in between, the surge, there was an earthquake in Pakistan, all of these things help to create these very different lenses to see and help understand what's happening. That is, I think, it's been critical to have the ability to have empathy for whatever's happening, whether that be on a deployment somewhere, or whether it be with another staff organization, or even within the government. There's an awful lot of intergovernmental things that we do within the medical field. And I think the broader that you have in your experience, the better off you're going to be. And so long as you are committed to seeing that piece of your career in that organization that you're part of have success, you're going to help, again, create excellence all around you.
All right, so all you medical service leaders out there, you got to be bilingual, got to speak both languages. Some great advice from Colonel O'Neal. But Chip, we wish you the best. Thanks for spending some time with us today, and thanks for being on Lopez on Leadership.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.